Bernoulli family, Oakland City University STEM class, 570 Mathematics, under the direction of Dr. Amy Barrett. Today we're going to look at probably the most important family in the history of mathematics, the Bernoullis. Here is a shortened family tree showing 8 of the family members who made significant contributions in mathematics or related fields. Today we're going to talk about those gentlemen highlighted in green. The Bernoulli family began in Germany and ended up began in Holland, where they were persecuted for their religions. Nicholas Sr.'s father moved the family to Germany, and then Nicholas Sr. would later move his family to Switzerland, where they would remain for the entirety. So we're going to take a look at the 3 generations of mathematicians, starting with Jacob I and Johann, and then we will go in chronological order through the remaining 6. So, beginning with Jacob I. Jacob was born in 1654. He is the oldest of Nicholas's sons. At a very young age, he showed a propensity for schooling. He was drawn to mathematics, though his father insisted he receive his degrees in philosophy and theology. So against his own dreams, Jacob complied and received his 2 degrees at a relatively young age, 17 for his first one and 22 for his theology degree. But his heart really wasn't in it. He really felt called toward mathematics. So he left home, left Switzerland, and went to France, where he was a mathematics tutor and was able to study with some of Descartes' followers. He did return to Switzerland, to Basel University, where his family was, and became their professor of mathematics in 1687. At that time, he began working with his younger brother, Johann. Initially, they were collaborators. That would turn into rivalries, and then an intense hatred really between the 2 brothers would separate them, forcing each along their own path. We remember Jacob primarily for his analysis of Leibniz's papers that had just come out, and also for the discovery of the equiangular spiral, which we see in the real world in certain shells. That was Jacob I, and now we're going to look at his younger brother, Johann. Johann is 12 years his junior. In fact, he did learn several of his mathematical foundations from his older brother, and they had a tutor-student relationship for some time. But Johann made a name for himself at the University of Basel, also becoming a professor of math. He did not receive the chair, and that was because his older brother Jacob had it. This is really when their feud began, or their rivalry began. Johann was accepted as the smarter of the 2, but because Jacob was older and had taught Johann much of what he knew, there was sibling rivalry. Jacob criticized his younger brother in public, saying how could the student be smarter than the master, and Johann, of course, took offense to that. So the 2 eventually parted ways. Johann ended up moving to Holland in 1695 to pursue his own career. Johann today is remembered for his work with imaginary numbers as well as negative numbers, also having been one of the primary teachers to Euler, and the fact that 2 of his sons would also make contributions to mathematics. So those are the first 2 generations. mathematicians. And now we're going to jump down to the second generation, the most prolific generation. I'm going to start over here with Nicholas, kind of on his own. There's not a whole lot on Nicholas the First. In fact, I could not find a picture. Part of the reason is that he's often confused with his cousin Nicholas II, who made more contributions. But in recent years, historians are looking back and finding out that Nicholas I did, in fact, make some unique contributions. Primarily his work using his Uncle Jacob's law of large numbers and finding the connection with that and what de Moivre had been doing with normal approximation. He was also one of the leading statisticians of his time, where he dealt primarily with probability systems. Now we're going to go back and look at the three sons of Johann. And this is really the meat and bones of the Bernoulli dynasty. So we'll start with Nicholas II. Here he is. Received both degrees in philosophy and law at relatively young ages, but similar to Jacob, he always wanted to pursue mathematics. His father, Johann, discouraged that, saying there was no money in mathematics, but Nicholas II persisted, and later would move to Italy and take over the chair of mathematics at Padua in 1719. He was invited in 1725 to come to the newly opened Mathematics Academy in St. Petersburg, Russia, which he did along with his brother, but he only lasted about 8 months there. He succumbed to the cold weather, fell ill, and did not recover. An interesting note is that when he did die, his professorship was left empty, and that's when Euler was invited to replace him. So we remember Nicholas II primarily for his work helping his father with the Leibniz-Newton dispute over calculus, and also for co-developing with one of his brothers, Daniel, Buffon's paradox. Now we will look at Daniel. He's the second son of Johann, and if I had to circle the most important Bernoulli, it would probably Daniel, like his brother, very smart. He became a physician as well as a mathematician and was invited along with Nicholas to travel to St. Petersburg. He would eventually work very well with Euler. In fact, as kids, they grew up learning mathematics together. And then when Nicholas died, Euler joined Daniel in mathematics, where they would continue collaborating. Daniel is known for his work in hydrodynamics. That is what he is known for. Bernoulli's principle is one of the primary engineering applications of our day and was instrumental in aircraft development and aerodynamics. But he did do some work with probability and statistics. Is Johann II. Younger than the other two. He was also a lawyer and received the mathematics chair at Basel when their father passed away. He won the Paris Academy Mathematics Award 4 times, Science and Mathematics Award. The most important of the two was his prize for magnetism, which he won with his brother Daniel and Euler. And in our last generation of Bernoullis, we have 2 men to look at, Johann III and Jacob. Here he is. Known as Gene in his youth, he was a child prodigy. Received his first PhD at the age of 13. He would later go on to travel the world, and even at 19, though he was the director of the Berlin Academy of Mathematics, he's probably best known not for his mathematical contributions, but for his writings, which touch on the historical and cultural contributions of those countries that he visited prior to settling in Berlin. So even though he did work with probability and the theory of equations, we know him better today because of what his writings on the history and culture. Bernoulli is Johann's younger brother, Jacob II. Picture of Jacob, but here's a picture of the Basel Academy where so many Bernoullis left their mark. Jacob also studied math and physics and even helped his uncle Daniel with some experimental physics problems. He also ended up in St. Petersburg in 1788 as a chair of mathematics, and on an interesting note, ended up marrying Euler's granddaughter, Charlotte. Unfortunately, Jacob dies at a very young age, at the age of 30, just a year after going to Russia. And so that is the Bernoulli family, the dynasty of mathematicians that have contributed so much. Thank you.